Pressure on you guys always.
Question is, do they have pants on?
Now that we're live, we'll find the whole world will know one way or the other.
No comment, Lynn.
Art, you're dressed appropriately for the field. You know, you always have to be ready, right?
I'm always in the field in my head. It's always spring and summer in my head too.
I think we're live and recording, so the technical difficulties for right now are over.
Okay, great. Well, then I will go ahead and call this meeting to order and welcome everybody. Obviously, some of us are struggling with maybe some sketchy Wi-Fi issues. So if you do drop out, I hope you'll be able to rejoin us. I myself am actually on a home computer, and if I drop out, I'll join on a different device, and I'll ask Art to step in for me to chair while in my absence if necessary. And I just want to remind us that obviously we're on Zoom here. We are being recorded and live streamed. We're not going to have the chat feature for that very reason. We're going to be conducting roll call voting, and we do have a quorum, which is good. If you do have questions or comments, maybe we can use that raise hand feature that's at the bottom. That'll help me kind of acknowledge folks that want to speak up. And of course, as our reports come available, we'll recognize the floor for those folks. So our first item on our agenda is approval of our minutes from the previous meeting. And I heard that there may be some corrections regarding the report from our Education and Public Programs Committee, just to clarify the language about the CARES Act funding that was to be expected this past month. So does anybody want to make a motion to amend?
What is the amendment? Joe, can you walk us through that?
Yeah, basically, Christy caught just a change in the language, really. There was a discussion that ended up in the minutes as Christy's team would be receiving directly CARES Act funds for programming, but it was supposed to be that various facilities like YMCAs and other institutions that receive CARES Act money for their students could have that money flow to Christy's distance learning programs. So just wanted that clarification in there.
So I guess that's a motion to amend the minutes, and hearing, are there any other corrections that folks want to make?
I move that we follow the recommendation of Dr. Kuiper with regards to amending the minutes from the last meeting.
Minutes have been moved as amended. Need a second.
I'll second that. This is Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa. And Nathan, can you give us a roll call vote then on approving the minutes?
Yes, sir. Nathan here. Just off the bat, please forgive me if I have any pronunciation errors and correct me, and I'll get that straight going forward. And I'm just going to go through who I see listed on the meeting. And if I miss anybody that has joined late, please let me know. Dr. Benzing.
Yes.
Ms. Burnett.
Yes.
Ms. Cooper.
Yes.
Dr. Evans.
Yes.
Ms. Murner. Ms. Murner, I did not hear anything there.
All right, I said yes.
Thank you. Dr. Nash.
Yes.
Mr. Quinones.
He's waving.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Russell.
Yes.
Mr. Sanford votes yes. Ms. Stowe.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. And just a reminder that you should have received in your packet our agenda for today, as well as a number of other documents to report that we'll go through as we progress through the meeting. I do want to remark that at Art's suggestion, I've reordered our agenda a little bit. When we get to the committee reports section, we'll be focusing on starting with research and collections and our development and marketing and education and public programs committees, because those are really central to our mission, and progressing through the report that way. Also want to remark that we're going to be spending some time recognizing Dr. Barry Dorsey. As all of you are aware, it was a subsequent loss, a significant loss to us last month to lose Dr. Dorsey, and we want to spend some time recognizing his contributions. And you should see among your packet there a resolution that I'll put forward to that effect at the beginning of our committee reports. So I want to share with you just a couple of comments in terms of my own report. My activities since our last quarterly meeting, I've spent some time contacting my representatives, Delegate Runyon and Senator Hanger, and encouraged them to continue to support the museum during this budget session that we have ongoing right now. Reminded them about the statewide mission that the museum has to interpret our natural history for all citizens. And of course, also about the Waynesboro Campus Initiative. And we're watching closely, and I think we'll hear a little bit more about this, the General Assembly's budget negotiations and the capital outlay portion of that budget. I did attend yesterday's foundation board meeting, and I want to welcome Len Poulin as a representative of the foundation board in our meeting today. One of the things that I heard there was that they are seeking nominations to their board. So I'll ask our staff to send out that nomination form to you all, because you may have some thoughts about who would be good representatives on the foundation board. And it's a very simple form, gives a little bit of background on what the person's strengths might be, and of course the contact information. So look for that form in a subsequent follow-up communication from our staff. I already mentioned as notable that we're going to be recognizing Dr. Dorsey in part of our agenda. And so we'll take the treasurer's report and the executive director's report before we go there. And that's going to conclude what I have to say regarding my own report today. So may we have the treasurer's report, Jennifer?
Yes, hello. Okay, so everyone had the treasurer's report in their materials for the board meeting. Taking a look first at the revenues, we have been fully funded by both Martinsville City and Henry County. And the education department has really worked diligently and moved forward to renew funding from both Martinsville City and Henry County for fiscal year 2022 as well. We also received additional federal funds through the Coronavirus Relief Fund. It's about $12,503. That's gone to offset expenses during the period March 1st, 2020 through December 30, 2020. So that is pretty much on the revenues. Moving to the operating expenses, you will see in the equipment 445% year to date. What that is that we have saved on utilities because we've basically been closed. And so there's been a shift of some money from utilities to give the green light to go towards the purchase of some equipment for the curators and that sort of thing. So that's pretty much why that's at the 445%. And when I'm done, if y'all have any questions, I'm sure Joe can talk more about that. The last thing on the operating expenses is that the agency contractual services are going to increase drastically. There's several projects that are wrapping up. And I think these are things that we're in, that are sort of like state mandated, such as the Human Capital Management Project. That's basically replacing some, things that have been in place since 1984. So it's bringing us into the, next century. There were also 2 audits performed at the beginning of fiscal year 21. That general accounting audit hasn't been billed yet, but the VITA audit has been. It was originally quoted at $31,000. The total cost is $45,671. So it's about $15,000 difference. So that's all I have. If anybody has any questions, chime in.
Any questions for Jennifer? And again, if you would just raise your hand, that'll help me recognize folks. So see Lisa raising her hand physically.
I am assuming we passed those audits with flying colors. Just curious about that.
Curious about the audits, Joe. Did we pass them?
Yes, well, I can go ahead and, sorry, yeah, both audits we passed with flying colors. There were some additions that they kind of come up with each year. We consolidated our policies and procedures. We also got some more security as far as the website goes, but Zach and Ryan did a great job working together to get the new website up, which already had the security in place for that. So the technology audit went really well. And then the general accounting audit was also really well. Everything was signed and dated like it was supposed to be. And like I said, we consolidated our policies and procedures. And that was really the only thing they asked us to do. We've done it and ready for the next one.
Thank you.
Any other questions regarding the treasurer's report? Hearing none, I'll ask Joe to give us his executive director's report.
Yeah, so I just want to begin by saying that, echoing what I said at last board meeting, that 2020 was not a lost year. It's a bit of an illusion here. We're open today. I don't think there's anybody in the galleries. We do have some ice out and about, but we have been open 1 to 2 days a week. But the fact that our classrooms and our galleries are empty doesn't mean that there isn't a ton going on. So I'm going to try to bring up a couple of things that just illustrate that fact. Over the last calendar year, really we're at about 1 year into the pandemic, but I know some of the other activities are going to be covered in the other committee reports. So, one thing that I might actually be stealing a little bit of Art's thunder here, but one thing we've worked hard on, and this is responsible for some of the adjustments in the budget that you see, is that since we're incurring cost savings with utilities, as well as we had some retirements and a couple of staffers leave for other positions, we didn't rehire those positions for various reasons, and that incurred a savings for the time being. So we've been working diligently behind the scenes to set up a molecular lab, a modern molecular lab. We've always had an area for processing specimens and storing DNA from our specimens. But that said, we purchased some new equipment. I'll kind of leave it at that because I think the curators and/or Art should be speaking to any of the details of that lab.
Joe, if you have details to share, please do.
Let's
if
see.
You don't, that's all right.
I really don't.
Okay.
I know the curators are more on top of that. Can I put Dr. Ivanov on the spot? Cal, I see that you've joined us. Can you talk about a couple of the upgrades? For instance, I know we did buy another ultra cold freezer for long-term storage of DNA, but I don't know if you can really just talk about some of the other upgrades to that facility.
Yeah, so I'll be glad to, and I'll try to be brief. But it's been something that's been on our radar for quite a while, pretty much since I joined the museum. We just have never gotten to it, and with the help of Joe and the board and Jonathan and a number of other members, we finally got some funding. So we started procuring tools that we didn't have. And what I mean by that is the facility was established as an Alzheimer lab, which is an old way pretty much of getting genetic data and protein data. So the tools were outdated. Although we had the basics, we had the bones, things such as fume hood, for example, which is actually pretty expensive. We had some freezer space, but new tools such as PCR machines, sequencers, gel imaging, and other tools we simply didn't have. So back in, I believe sometime in October, November, we got the okay and we got the funds and started procuring these materials. And we're almost to the point of where we're waiting for 3 or 4 more items in order to make the lab fully functional. That means within a month or so, it's our hope that we'll actually be starting not only keeping and storing genetic material, but we'll be able to analyze it, including materials that are already at the museum.
So really what this does, thank you, Cal, will enhance what the curators can do. And we don't have to buy the real high-end stuff like DNA sequencers. We can do the DNA extraction and preservation here, and then we can contract out for very inexpensive amounts of money the actual sequence data that the curators can use for the various questions that they're asking. And another, just a line of effort that I want to bring up, because this brings into the fold the VMNH Foundation. Going back over a year ago, the foundation had voted to supply some funds that would be a match to the funds procured by the, I'm going to get the name wrong, but it's our regional cave foundation. So one that protects, studies, and conserves our cave environments in Virginia. Nonetheless, a team consisting of Dr. Adam Pritchard, former curator Dr. Alex Hastings, and others. You may recall that they had come across a well-preserved skeleton of a prehistoric cat measuring almost 6 feet long. This is going to be a fantastic specimen in really good condition, but requires a lot of conservation. So we, of course, have not gone to do that extraction and start the conservation efforts yet for obvious reasons, but we've now rescheduled that for late September. So that is something that's still ongoing. So it's good to see the curators still talking amongst themselves about collaboration. Down on the floor, while we have the opportunity to work without having to work around school groups and public visitors, thanks to Cal Ivanov, Ryan Barber, and Jessica Davenport of the staff, we've installed a new butterflies exhibit. It's a worldwide butterflies exhibit, which is quite attractive and it's unique. I've seen dozens of butterfly exhibits around different museums, and this one is very nice, and it just has a unique take on butterfly diversity. Related to that, you've heard in the past, we've been updating wild watersheds by enhancing our trout in the classroom presence there. We got a giant fish tank that is chock full of trout right now. We still have more elements to go along with that, so that's going to be a nice addition. And upcoming, we currently have in our special exhibits gallery the cats exhibit. That, of course, was opened shortly before closing last year. So the team is working on a schedule to extend its stay, because really we didn't get that many people through the galleries yet. So we want to make sure that we get the most effect out of that exhibit as we can, but it will be succeeded by an exhibit that right now has the working title, The Science of Flight. And what makes this exciting is, one, Christy and her staff has been sitting down looking at SOLs and so forth. The curators have been getting together. There's a wide variety of topics ranging from insects, bats, birds, to even things like atlatl and other items that were used for hunting that can be highlighted in a Science of Flight exhibit. And of course, central to that will be some of the unique holdings that we have, such as the gliding reptile from the local solite quarry, Mecistotrachelos. So we'll be able to highlight a lot of great things there. And at the meeting yesterday, and of course that was less than 24 hours ago, I challenged the foundation to find some corporate entities that might be interested in partnering with this, because in our best case scenario, we make the exhibit modular and we can add it to our rental capabilities. It would be nice to be able to make the funds back that we invest in it. And I think it will be not only attractive, but informative So Len Poulin and Tyler Carter of the VMNH Foundation have already been working with us to make contact with some corporate entities that we think will be very interested in this. So Len's brought up a few up in the Waynesboro area, and Tyler, of course, is helping us out more locally here in Southern Virginia. So I think we have a good shot at getting some partnerships there. You'll hear more coming out of the other committees regarding our online presence. I'm just, we're still really continuing full speed ahead with our online activities. They've been going very well. In fact, we've switched over some of our corporate partners who are supporting various activities around the museum that we can't run. And we've actually been having them essentially become sponsors of our online activity. So that's been very well received. Christy and the Education Committee will be putting out a report, so I'll kind of leave that to them. But I just personally, I'm impressed with what they have been able to do over the past year, despite the difficult circumstances. You'll also hear a report from the Waynesboro Advocacy Committee. I will just say I was really shocked, and thanks to Tom to noting this statistic, but just last Tuesday, we had our Wayne Theater Signature Speaker Series talk. We've been doing monthly talks that surround the information that is proposed to be covered in the exhibits at the VMNH Waynesboro campus. And so we had Dr. Jim Beard, our Curator Emeritus of Earth Science, talk about the geology of the Shenandoah Valley. And I think the final count of online participants was around 1,400. So I realize you don't know how long people are engaging with these lectures, but at the very beginning, there were well over 100. And towards the end, that number, of course, swelled. So I just want to use that as a means to point out that we're in good shape. The General Assembly, of course, will be putting out a budget here in the spring that will hopefully continue to be positive. We have more to report on that with the Waynesboro Advocacy Committee. But as far as our general appropriation goes, we're moving forward with confidence that we should be in good shape beginning the next fiscal year. So a year ago, I did not see us being in as good a position as we are right now. We were hoping for the best, but planning for the worst. That said, thanks to the staff, we've kind of come through this past year and kind of staring down this hopeful springtime of rapid vaccination distribution and eventual return to some form of normalcy. Incidentally, this was a small detail that came out in the Facilities Committee, but Tim King, our head of Buildings and Grounds, did talk a little bit about how the staff have made sanitization and other efforts to keep our visitors and our staff safe kind of a priority. It's kind of a new form of business as usual now. We did have CARES Act money that we used to invest in some equipment to assist with that. And so that certainly continues to be pushed forward as a priority. The last thing I wanted to bring up was a request from one of our trustees, Roberto Quinones, was kind of curious about the VMNH Foundation Board of Directors and kind of their makeup, because we're of course talking about, okay, we have exhibits, we have research, we have these different activities, where can we find community partners? And so he was interested. So I kind of just broke things down generally, and Roberto and others, if you have further questions, I'll try to clarify. But we have a pretty diverse foundation board of directors that represent different facets of our community. So within the business community, we have a quality assurance manager, a human resources manager, a VP of human resources, a VP of one of our local longstanding corporations, which has been a corporate partner many times. We have people who are in finance, either in the banking community or investment community. We have nonprofits represented. In particular, Jennifer Thomas, who's executive director of the Virginia Association of Museums, has joined us as a foundation board member. So that's relatively new. From the academic community, we have retired university director of development. We have a couple of faculty members from Roanoke College in particular. And we also have the executive director of the Patrick Henry Community College Foundation as one of our foundation board member. for foundation board members. And we have several representatives, either active or retired, from regional schools, not just Martinsville, Henry County, but other areas as well. And lastly, I'll point out that 2 members of our foundation board are former members of the Board of Trustees. So it's pretty diverse. And I would say some of them are very good in the traditional sense of, say, you know, getting us together with corporate partners. Others, such as our Roanoke College colleagues, they were the ones who were instrumental in starting the Dragon Festival as a concept, and really began several years ago steamrolling forward the Family Science Festival concept. And even though that's not a traditional role of a foundation board member, it's an effective role, because we've gotten grants thanks to Ryan's efforts to basically pay for our festivals on the front end. And then ultimately the money that we take at the admissions point and in other ways as well, basically becomes pure profit. So with that, I know I tossed a lot at you, but I'm going to open things up to some questions. And however, I also want to have Ryan Barber cover the kind of more about our link with the foundation in terms of our advancement report. So for the moment, I'll open things up for questions to anything I've covered thus far.
Joe,
Questions for Joe?
Joe,
Yes, Art.
I have a question regarding the numbers for people that are participating in museum programs on Facebook. Are those numbers that we're gathering as part of our marketing analytics?
Oh yeah, I'll let Ryan dive into the details on that, but they pay close attention to those data and record them regularly.
All right.
Ryan, did you want to comment on? Mukunda, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. Good morning. I was wondering, I know we had talked about it before the pandemic, but we didn't get it off the ground about doing something around astrology and, you know, getting people like with the telescopes to come in and do stuff. And we had, I mean, I think there's been a lot of, you know, stuff with the planets and different astronomy things. Even I know with the boys' schools, they had a big deal about watching the International Space Station. And so I don't know if we still agreed that that was something we wanted to do. I know I'd made some inroads with the people up in Roanoke, but then, you know, the pandemic and everything kind of got dropped.
Yeah, Mukunda, you bring up a good point that was something that we started to develop a little bit of momentum, and not just in-house. We actually had some retired scientists who've retired locally want to get involved in that. So we've connected with them. But I know I mentioned the molecular lab and the investments we made in that, but one of the other bits of equipment that kind of maybe gets kind of lost in the shuffle is we purchased a 10-inch reflector telescope. And this is one of those, I haven't tried it yet, so I'm a little shy on how this thing works, but it basically has a GPS unit on it. So the great thing about that is that if you get a particular feature in the sky that you want to look at, a planet or a constellation or whatever, the GPS unit will track it. So that way children, while they might have to focus the scope and it is hands-on, they won't have to try and track it, which is the difficult part. So we look forward to maybe even in the fall engaging with that. So that certainly hasn't died on the vine, Dr. Abdul-Baki, but we'll be looking forward to engaging that in the future. Christy, I don't know if you have anything new that you want to add to it. We did have a staffer who unfortunately took a position elsewhere. She was quite good. She was very engaged in astronomical photography and so forth. And she was kind of a go-to person for us. But you know, we'll manage to get by one way or the other, right, Chrissy? Okay, she's giving me a thumbs up.
Yeah, Mukunda, that sounds like something that the Education and Public Programs Committee should just consider in their maybe next agenda. But yeah, I agree. It sounds like a great opportunity. And are there other questions for Joe? Again, if you could use the raise hands feature, which is at the bottom under reactions, that will help me.
My hand's up. I just looked up the astronomy clubs in Virginia. The Astronomical League has a list for Virginia, and there's nothing in the immediate vicinity, but Roanoke Valley has an astronomical society, and so it might be worthwhile to partner with them, so you have a collection of scopes out there. You know, once social distancing is such that people are comfortable with sticking their faces in other people's equipment. But that might be a worthwhile thing to have on a nice clear night in the parking lot or on the roof or some other place nearby.
I think we did connect with Roanoke. It was either Roanoke or Danville, Art. I can't remember, but it was maybe during the solar eclipse.
Oh, okay.
That we did. So we do have a bit of a relationship there. Amazingly, somehow or another, we hooked up with a Tidewater astronomy club, and they are actually enthusiastic about coming out here, even after we told them how far away we were. So bringing partners into it is a good thing. And there's actually two local here in Martinsville, well, at least Henry County, amateur astronomers, people who own scopes and so forth that want to get involved as well. So yeah, bringing partners into it will be part of the success.
Anybody on the phones have questions for Joe? I realize you can't raise your hand, so if you just want to unmute yourself, you can chime in. Hearing none, maybe we'll go ahead and let Ryan take up the advancement report. Is that our next step, Joe? And Ryan, if you could revisit the question that Art raised about Facebook numbers and how we're tracking those, that would be good.
Sure. Thanks, Tom. So yeah, Art, on page 4 of the advancement report, we basically have a full page of social media statistics. So it's everything from page views to likes, comments, things like that. And what we do with that is the more we can capture, the better. It's going to help us determine, number one, who we're reaching, but also we can sort of overlay that with industry data, the tourism office of the state, and figure out, okay, of the audiences that primarily visit museums of our type, are we reaching them, and how can we better reach them? So it's a full page of stats there, hopefully pretty informative. As far as the advancement report, Joe covered some of the major items, but I do want to highlight a few more. So if you look at the front page or the first page of the report, sort of the snapshot of where we're at. Charitable giving to the foundation is of things like grants, memberships, Discovery Fund, and whatnot. But that's good news, and we want to keep pushing forward with that. As far as museum revenue, that's down quite a bit, not surprisingly, due to limited openings and the pandemic. But that being said, we are bringing in revenue. That's admissions and store sales. And when we look at our sales per visitor, it's actually very strong. So the folks that are coming in are spending money in the store, which is good news. Just want to talk about a few partnerships. As far as programming, like Joe mentioned, we have transitioned from some of the most popular things that we did, like large festivals, in-person school group programming, were the most popular for partners, for funding partners. So we've kind of transitioned and offered virtual programming opportunities. So we're working with Carter Bank and Trust, Boxley, SOVA, which is the local or sort of regional hospital, and also Patterson Foundation, which you probably heard more about. That was a $20,000 grant for programming specifically. So these programs have been very popular with the partners, everything from $250 small partnerships to up to 20,000 plus. So we want to continue that. As far as upcoming proposals or pending proposals, we have a ask to Harvest Foundation. So they have a COVID-19 sustainability program. So basically what that would be is not only funding, but also some training for staff and boards. So that can be foundation board and trustees. And basically they work with us to identify strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, obviously threats, dig further into what we do and how we operate and how we can better achieve our goals. So we'll find out more about that in late February. And once we hopefully receive that, we can share that with the board if anybody would like to take part along with staff. As far as upcoming events for the foundation, we've got a couple of virtual events coming up. So normally we hold our in-person Thomas Jefferson Awards in March each year. That's not really feasible this year. So March 18th, we're going to host the first ever virtual Thomas Jefferson Awards. It's going to be from 6:30 to 7:30. The lineup is going to be pretty similar to what we've done in person in the past. So we'll have speakers, we'll have a keynote speaker, awardees, presenters, the full lineup. And what we'll do is use Zoom as the format, and then we will live broadcast that on YouTube. And so we'll have links both on our social media, our Facebook page, and also our website for folks to click on that YouTube link to watch the live event. So more to come on that as far as a link, but we have reached out to all the awardees, presenters, everybody's on board and happy to take part virtually. We also have, it's early in the works, but we're working with the special events committee of the foundation to come up with our gala situation. So normally that is in person in April, but again, that's not really feasible to host any kind of meaningful in-person gala this year. So staff are working to develop basically what's going to be a month-long event. So we're going to kick it off with sort of a state of the museum address with museum leaders. We'll have a full lineup every week. There's going to be highlights of what we do and sort of mission-based programs. So the goal with this, there's two goals. The first goal is to make sure people know why we host the gala in the first place, which is to raise support for vital mission-based programs. It's the food and the drinks are great to think about, but we want to get back to why we host it in the first place, which is to provide support for our mission. The second goal is to give donors real examples of what their money supports. So if you give $100, what does that mean? And so we want to give them examples of, it can provide food, scholarships, food for the live animals, field trip opportunities, the variety of things that we do. So with their support, we will, again, provide them examples. So we'll have an online giving option. Again, that's going to be a month-long celebration. So as we finalize the details for that, we'll share that with the board, obviously. And our goal is to get a variety of donations, everything from $10 up to hopefully $500 plus for the companies that might have traditionally done a gala table sponsorship. So we feel good about the plan. And again, it's as much awareness as it is dollars brought in. So more to come on that. As far as stats, I mentioned page 4, the social media stats. I also want to highlight on page 5 of the advancement report, we've expanded our diversity and inclusion information. So here you've got information about who we do business with as the museum. So what do our vendors look like that we purchase from? Also, Christy provided some education program stats. It's more limited than it would be outside the pandemic, but as far as programming we're doing now, it's a report on who we're reaching. Also, our Museums for All program, it's not our program, but we take part in it, and that's the EBT program for visitors. We still have visitors taking part in that, which is great. And what that does is provide greatly reduced admission for folks in the EBT program. And so we promote that. The EBT program promotes that, and also IMLS, which is the Institute for Museum and Library Services, which funds the entire program. Finally, there's a report on our staffing. So if you look at both part-time, full-time staff, also staff in supervisory roles, we've tried to report some important racial data there. Also, male, female, minority, whatnot. So as you look at this, if you see items that you would like to add to it, we can gather more data, but this is kind of where we're at this point. Finally, on the last page, which hopefully you're mostly familiar with, we've got our report on where visitors have come from. So this is for July through December, the first half of the fiscal year. I think one of the important stats here is that 74% of our visitors have come from outside Martinsville, Henry County. So we are getting visitors from throughout the state, very strong in North Carolina and other states as well. But it is very, very important. So we'll continue to track this data and tailor it to what we see and who we want to reach. those are the main highlights. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Ryan, and thanks for struggling through the technical difficulties as well this morning. Any questions for Ryan or Joe regarding the advancement report?
Good morning, everyone. I had a question, Ryan, with regards to folks that are bilingual, folks that speak Spanish. Do you see much of that where families come in and they English isn't their native language, they don't communicate that way?
I think we see it somewhat. We actually don't see it a lot, and I think we feel like that's somewhat of a missed opportunity. And those are audiences we want to reach more. So we've been talking to Roberto and some staff as far as what resources we can come up with to create some bilingual exhibit information and programming possibly. So how do we better reach those audiences? So I think it's an opportunity to grow to reach those audiences.
I just want to add, we're talking about making science of flight exhibit, or at least part of it, bilingual, as well as sort of a goal to kind of kick off addressing that issue. So thank you, Melanie.
I see Siri's hand. Siri, did you have a question?
Thank you. Yes, I did have a question, and it's probably, mostly to be attributed to the fact that I'm new. Ryan, I know you said, y'all are capturing this data on people of color, women, language speakers, whatever. What do y'all do with that information?
That's a good
Why
question.
is it captured?
Yeah, so part of it is programming and exhibits. So Joe mentioned the goal to make the next exhibit bilingual. We also try to dig in as much as possible to better reach audiences, both people that we currently serve, but ones we don't serve. And so that's where social media is a valuable tool. With we're able to dig in a lot more than we would with traditional media, print advertising, TV, and whatnot. So that's our overall goal, is to figure out who we're reaching and then figure out who we are not reaching and how we can do it better.
And Ryan, as you guys have schooled me in the past, that by understanding who our users are, that is people using our website, our social media, or visiting, it helps us target our social media ads that we invest in. So we know, that we're targeting the appropriate people that would have interest, because we can make generalizations based upon those data. Is that correct?
That's correct. And so we track it not only with the social media tools themselves, but also physically. So when we were doing festivals, we would track how many people obviously came from North Carolina, but also the folks that brought in, say, their Greensboro Science Center membership card and use that reciprocal admission. It helped us kind of figure out the interest. And we also work directly with other institutions like that to do shared promotions. So yes, social media has got a lot of valuable tools. You can dig really, really far in and see who your audiences are.
And I'll also say regarding these statistics that I think, knowing where we stand right now helps us to figure out what might be our goals for the future. And so I've asked the strategic planning committee to, think about what would be our goals regarding diversity, and, certainly welcome any other trustee who is interested in that to join the strategic planning committee or share their thoughts.
Do we have time for me to ask some more questions about this, or are y'all trying to move along?
Oh, no, we're fine. Siri, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, that actually did what you just said, led me to sort of the follow-up there, which is, looking at the numbers, a couple of things. One, I'm kind of wondering why we have a category that just says minority, as opposed to being, broken out further. So if there's a particular reason for that, I'd like to hear it, especially since there isn't a white category next to it. My other question with that is, as it relates to this idea of like goals, I would be interested in seeing on this report or somewhere what this means in context. You know what I mean? Like, is there something that we're shooting for? What are we, what is this relative to? Are there any other sort of benchmarks, whether that's based off of state demographics or this particular, a particular footprints, the demographics of whatever our major footprint is in the state, that sort of thing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And those are excellent questions. And we are very early in this process. So we welcome, your thoughts and how to proceed with this. And yeah, I struggled with that too. I saw minority. I was wondering what that means. And so maybe there are better categories that we could add to that diversity report. It looks like Lisa might have a question. Lisa?
I was just going to say, Siri, why don't we invite you to our next strategic committee meeting, and we can delve into this further. I mean, I think we'd all like to do better and understand what we should be doing and what benchmarking we should be doing. So I would welcome that discussion at our next committee meeting on what we should be reporting out and how we should be doing it.
I'm happy to join.
And
you are appointed to the Strategic Planning Committee. Thank you. Yeah, Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out a couple of things. First of all, Siri, I get your point 100%, and it just occurred to me because we have your eyes on the outside looking in, that we are missing something in our breakdown. So I'm going to work with the staff to ensure that we break down our data in a more descriptive way. That's going to provide some more details. Just for instance, what really comes to mind is that when I do see that minority category, which was probably on our part, my part, just stretched out for or laid out for expediency's sake, it allows us to miss some details. So for instance, of those people that would be listed on minority staff, looking at them, that is undescriptive, because I do believe that those are all African-American staffers, even though we do have a growing Hispanic population. It's still small, but it's a growing population, and they're not represented amongst the staff. So we lose that resolution of the data. So we'll work to modify that report, and would love to run it by you and the rest of the Strategic Planning Committee. And I'm sorry, I did have another point based upon one of your, what is this based against? I will say that as a state agency, that the state does give us encouragement to have a certain percentage of male and female, people who are non-white and so forth. Offhand, I don't remember what those statistics are, but it is something that our Human Resources Office does take note of. What that really means versus this right now, I don't know. I'm a little unprepared on that, but it was something that I would like to consider between now and that Strategic Planning Committee. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Tom.
Yeah, and it strikes me that there are other agencies that are probably exploring the same thing. So we can look around at the state level and see what other agencies are using to, represent the diversity of the population. I heard Mukunda on the phone. I don't know whether Mukunda had a question. Then we'll go to Carol.
Isn't this the first time we're reporting anything with minorities? Because I thought every time I looked at the reports, it was usually we were focused on male, female, and their age, and where they were coming from, whether they were in our zip codes or not. But correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like this is the first time I'm hearing anything about racial breakdown.
I think it is early. I don't remember whether we had it in the last advancement report, but you're right. We've been tracking these statistics for male-female breakout, and we've recently added, looking at a more diverse representation of the audiences that we're serving, not just who are visiting the museum, but as Joe was saying, among our staff and among our boards. So all of this is fairly new. Does that help, Mukunda?
Yeah, this may be only the second time it's been in a report, so we've recognized what we need to know and have started doing it. So this is very early in the game, and all opinions and suggestions would probably be very welcome, I think.
Thanks, Roberto. And let's go to Carol, and then I see Lisa's hand.
I just had a request, and thank you for including this in the report. I'm wondering if perhaps as you are looking at staff, it would be helpful for, I'm looking at it on my other screen, so that's why I'm not looking at in the camera. It would be helpful if full-time, part-time, those could actually be broken down further by job titles, just so we have a sense of what people are doing. I realize we've got the staff and supervisory roles that are broken out there, but it would just be helpful, like, what are we talking about in terms of curators? What are we talking about in terms of custodians? Just to see that data, breaking that down a little further.
That's a good comment, recognizing that we have a small staff. So when you start looking at small numbers, percentages kind of look funny, but I think it was Lisa next.
So one thing that caught my ear is when Ryan was going over the details of the advancement report, he said that you could really get into a lot of granularity in terms of our social media, in terms of who's looking at our pages, et cetera. So I wonder if there's any way to report on diversity there too. So that might be something that we consider, you know, are we reaching a diverse audience or not with our social media campaigns? I don't know if that's available, but Ryan, what you said caught my ear.
Do you want to respond?
Yeah, thanks,
to that,
Lisa.
Ryan?
We'll dig further. It's there's a lot of tools available. I can't speak specifically to how deep we can go, but I can work with Zach on that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, great questions, great discussion. Are there any further questions at this point about either the advancement report or Joe's executive director's report?
Just one quick addition. Also looking at age, I think, and I'm talking about staff and looking and thinking about diversity with regards to folks' age. And I'm aware that everyone can't be 20. You know, that there's, you know, certain requirements, et cetera. But I think that's an area to look at too, looking at the different populations. And adding Siri to that conversation is obviously a really smart thing to do with her background.
And again, just to report from our Human Resources Office, we have a lot of that data available for the state. So it's just a matter of consolidating it and adding it to this report. So we should be able to do that relatively quickly.
Well, I'm glad to see that there's so much energy around this topic. And once again, I encourage anybody that's interested to express interest through the Strategic Planning Committee, because that's where we're kind of hosting this conversation. So for those that are interested, I'm sure Lisa would be happy to welcome you to the next Strategic Planning Committee meeting. I do see Roberto's hand.
Yes, I just wanted to connect. Joe had mentioned I had asked about the foundation, and it kind of connects to this topic as well. As my rookie card is kind of running out here, I was in the process of trying to understand the relationship between the two organizations, realizing that they seem to have an army of people on their board and advisory committee. So my thoughts were that that group and body would also be doing a proactive outreach that would dovetail and complement what we're doing as well in terms of outreach. Going back to the prime mission that we see on the report itself that says that we exist to serve all citizens of the state. So not only that data give us who is actually showing up, but it's also showing us who isn't showing up. And therefore, between their body and our body, what efforts in outreach we need to complement or maybe expand on or request additional assistance on to make sure that the all is capital bold, highlighted, italicized, etc. So it's great to see Siri's background in this area. And some of us marketing geeks, I'm sure, will be more than happy to help out as well.
Thank you, Roberto. I don't see any other hands, but are there, let's see, I guess there's one other item that Joe didn't cover, and that was just the the university partnerships. I'll just draw your attention to that committee did meet the University Partnerships Ad Hoc Committee, and I mentioned something about that committee at our last meeting, is to help the museum, I guess, make connections to colleges and universities that are applying for grants. And you can look at the report there. And I don't know if Joe, if you wanted to add any comments in particular about that.
Yeah, we had a good committee meeting with a lot of good suggestions about how to connect our staff, and that's all the staff. That's not just our researchers, but our education staff, our exhibit staff, anyone involved in outreach, because many of our university partners are applying for a variety of grants, many of which have a requirement that there are outreach outcomes that are a result of these grants. So you might have a faculty member conducting research on a particular topic, but that the grant is seen as more favorable if that science can be translated into a publicly digestible form and then presented to the public so that it gets more impact. So we would like to be able to go to our university partners and say that we can be your broader impact statement, because in some cases it can be very lucrative. It could also be a situation where we exceed our capacity, so we have to be careful about how many partnerships we engage in. But I just want to point out, I've got a note here somewhere. We sort of have what I might call a bit of a pilot project. I'll have to do it by memory. We have a bit of a pilot project in which our research associate, Ray Bernor from Howard University, has spearheaded an effort with 6 other universities, as well as the Virginia Museum of Natural History, to submit an NSF grant proposal that includes both our researchers and Christie's education team. So this is a database-based project in which it's not just combining or synthesizing databases that have the collecting information and provenance of various kinds of museum specimens, but also the data gleaned from them. So a lot of these are going to be fossil and skeletal materials, which of course are intertwined, as most fossil materials are skeletal in nature. So in other words, you can get 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional measurements of skeletal material from extant and extinct species. And this is all going to be intertwined into one kind of large-scale program to glean evolutionary data from selected groups, such as horses, squirrels, and reptiles are going to be 3 of probably the primary groups that are looked at. So I think once we get this going, and if VMNH, if we're successful, VMNH stands to receive a good chunk of cash that will support Christie's outreach. So a lot of it will be themed towards SOLs, but inspired by the research results of this project. Secondly, a lot of that money will be go towards hiring temporary workers to act as technicians for the researchers. And lastly, internships primarily through Patrick Henry Community College, but other possible nearby colleges as well, in which that will count as part of that broader impacts to do that training of the next generation of scientists. So I think if we get this underway, first of all, the proposal is shaped up nicely. It'll be submitted next month. So that unto itself, successful or not, or modified after the next round of reviews or not, it will act, I think, as a model that we can present to other universities and really solidify new partnerships. And one thing that came out in the committee meeting is, of course, we have, off the top of my head, I don't remember the exact number, but we have somewhere on the order of 30 research associates that are around the country, many of which are right here in Virginia. And so these are people that we can start with as we've developed relationships with them to help spread the word that as university faculty are attempting to apply for large-scale grants on the 6-7 figure scale, that we can be a part of that, take part of the burden off their shoulders and be something that would be in the long term very beneficial for both parties concerned. So look out for measurements of horses, reptiles, and squirrels coming down the line.
Okay, thank you, Joe. We are about an hour into our meeting, and now I'd like to transition to our committee reports. But before we do that, I want to spend a little time recognizing Dr. Barry Dorsey, and all of us are aware that he passed last month. His time and service on the committees and boards of the museum predates my tenure, but during my tenure, he served as the chair, my past chair, and he served on a number of committees, including the executive committee and the facilities committee and our finance and development and marketing committee, among others, and of course, a really important citizen to the community. So we are going to present a resolution to recognize him. But before I do that, I thought it'd be nice to just share a few photos of Dr. Dorsey. And I've asked the staff to put together, it's just a 1 or 2 minute long slideshow. And if at this time Zach would be willing to share that screen with us, we'll go ahead and watch this, and then we'll come back with the resolution.
Is the screen visible?
It is, thank you. Well, thank you to the staff for putting that together. I think that brings back some memories of Dr. Dorsey and his incredible contributions to the museum, including the education pavilion, something probably we're all familiar with. At this time, I'd like to read a resolution that you'll find in your packet, and then I will ask for a roll call vote to approve it. Whereas Dr. Barry Dorsey was appointed to the Board of Trustees of the Virginia Museum of Natural History in July 2015. Whereas Dr. Dorsey served as chairman of the VMNH Board of Trustees from May 2017 to May 2019. Whereas Dr. Dorsey led the museum's facilities committee, including the groundbreaking for the upcoming Gene S. Adams Education Pavilion, and championed further connections between the museum and the J. Frank Wilson Park. Whereas Dr. Dorsey frequently gave expert advice for navigating the nuances of state government and was a wealth of information on higher education. Whereas Dr. Dorsey was an enthusiastic advocate for the Virginia Museum of Natural History in the Martinsville community and the General Assembly alike. Therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Virginia Museum of Natural History hereby note with great sadness the loss of Dr. Barry Dorsey, whose valued contributions during his service as trustee and past board chairman of the Virginia Museum of Natural History will be sorely missed. And be it resolved further that the Secretary of the Board of Trustees prepare a copy of this resolution for presentation to the family of Dr. Barry Dorsey as an expression of the Virginia Museum of Natural History's respect for his memory. Done this 13th of February 2021 in Martinsville, Virginia, by a unanimous vote of the Board of Trustees of the Virginia Museum of Natural History, to be signed by Joe and myself. So at this time, I would like to take a motion to approve this resolution in a second.
This is Nathan. I move to approve it.
I heard a move from Nathan.
I second the motion. Faye.
A second from Faye. So Nathan, if you'll call a roll, please, for vote.
Dr. Abdul Baki,
Yes, here, I second.
thank you. Dr.
Yay.
Benson,
Aye.
Ms. Burnett,
Aye.
Ms. Cooper,
Aye.
Dr. Evans,
Aye.
Ms. Murner,
Aye.
Dr. Nash,
Aye.
Mr. Phillips,
Aye.
Mr. Quinones,
Aye.
Ms. Russell,
Aye.
Ms. Stowe.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you all. And on that solemn note, our business moves forward. So we will be presenting that resolution in a frame to his family. Next, I'd like to see whether there is a report from our Facilities and Operations Committee. And given that Dr. Dorsey chaired that committee, I recognize that there may not have been a lot of goings on, but is there anything to report? Either maybe Jennifer or Cord. I don't see Cord on the call.
We did meet, Tom.
Thank you,
Lisa
Joe.
Murner was in attendance. So
Okay.
Lisa, I don't know if you want to start things off, and I'm certainly happy to fill in any details, or however you'd like to handle it.
I can say a few words. I mean, the notable things to me were the progress we're making on the elevator, the progress we're making with our ESCO. And for people who don't know what that is, it's a contract where you have a third party come in and make your buildings much more energy efficient, and then you share the energy savings with them. We had in particular discussion about solar and the availability of some state funds for solar. And then we had a discussion about the roof for our historic facility that's not located directly at the museum. So it was a very good meeting. Joe, if you want to cover anything, I did not.
Sure. I'll just also add that the ESCO, the work that really Jonathan has been spearheading with our building superintendent, Tim King, the work will begin next week in terms of them coming up with a more detailed analysis of what the project will entail. So Jonathan, I don't know if you wanted to give the 30-second version of where we stand and what's upcoming.
Okay. Well, we've made it through the process of selecting Siemens as our group that we're going to go with for the project in general. There's still $2 million on the table, 500,000 of which is for us to implement a solar at the facility, along with some storage. The process begins is the investment grade audit. So that this is the audit that we'll take to the bank to get the funds to make the project happen. So that does start Wednesday. It would have started Friday, but under threat of weather, they decided wisely, I think, to move it on to Wednesday coming up. So we're excited to get that process started. The head engineer is coming in, and then he'll bring his team in to follow him after he makes his original notes. It's kind of the 30-second pitch.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I think other aspects of the building will be covered in other committee reports, but the projects that we are working on have been moving forward quite well. In fact, just to add on to what Lisa had said, the replacement of the passenger elevator, which was a maintenance reserve project, should be completed and the elevator operational in the first half of March at the latest.
Lisa? You're muted.
I have a question, and it's a little bit related to facilities, but it's also for Joe, bigger picture. I do think, we'll be back to having multiple visitors at the museum, hopefully in the fall, maybe late summer. is there anything we need to do to our facilities, to our staffing, is there anything we need to do to start preparing for that? I know at, sort of my company, we're starting to have those discussions. We're sort of seeing hopefully the end, knock on wood, of everybody having to stay at home all the time. Is there anything we should be doing now to prepare for that return to somewhat normal times?
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Jonathan had successfully procured some CARES Act funds, primarily to be used for sanitation. So that is now standard operating procedure for our buildings and grounds crew. So we've purchased some equipment to make that not just more efficient, but more effective. So we know we're going to be doing that. The second thing is that with the ESCO, they're going to be looking at our HVAC system, which will probably end up being modified somewhat. From the standpoint of the air handling system with filters, as well as, and Jonathan, you can toss in any details you like, but something about drawing the air up from ground level up towards the ceiling and circulating that way rather than having a lateral flow, not just for the current pandemic, but for any kind of future outbreak of any kind of viral disease. Does that sound about right, Jonathan?
Yeah, that's it in a nutshell. They're going to develop a heat map, so to speak, for where visitors are most likely to be, and then increase the circulation in those areas. There's been talk of some ionization inside the HVAC, or there's a peroxide spray system. There's been a couple of ideas thrown out. We'll be able to tell you more once the investment grade audit's complete and we see how much of the funding we can dedicate to cleaning the air and just recirculating it in a proper way for future pandemics, hopefully, no time soon.
Yeah, so we'll report back on the results of that investment grade audit. Incidentally, both the proposals that we reviewed, they including the Siemens proposal, do talk about also, just as incidentally here, outreach opportunities as well. So ways in which we can inform the public about our energy usage, how we're generating energy on our site, as well as our kind of human health related considerations. So that's apparently very common in these efforts, that they want people to know, if you're entering this building, this is how it's being energy efficient, this is how it's protecting you, and so forth.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Joe. One more, Lisa, yes?
I'll just add that we did have a discussion. Joe just brought up signage, about how we think it's going to be important to have signage to talk about the solar that we're probably going to install, and to help educate folks about the benefits of solar. And, going back to our diversity discussion earlier, I hope that will be in multiple languages, not just in English.
I'd like to take our Research and Collections Committee report, and I'll recognize Dr. Art Evans, and also point to the extensive document that is in your packet.
Roberto had his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, did I miss that?
Yeah, Roberto, did you have something to say?
Nope, Lisa touched it. I figure if we're in the process of redoing signage and there's money to do it, it's also a great time to kill two birds with one stone.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Pardon me. Well, thank you. I just want to call everyone's attention to the Research and Collections Committee report that's in the board packet, has been for about the last year now, and it's a beast. But don't be intimidated by it. Please do peruse it. You'll notice that it starts out with very detailed minutes from the last committee meeting, and I urge you for a complete summary of what we discussed today to look for in the next minutes, because there was so much going on today. I still haven't absorbed it all yet. So, but you can see that in spite of the pandemic, the museum has been acquiring specimens and artifacts and incorporating them into their collections. And scrolling down through the report, starting on page 8, you can see that there's a new feature. This is an executive summary of the full quarterly report. And this is where I've asked Ben and the curators to highlight specific programs, publications, outreach efforts, collaborative projects with other institutions and so on. And so I want to draw your attention to these, and I hope that all of you will at least take a few moments to go through this. And of course, if you're looking for more details, a more in-depth look at what our curators and research and collection staff are doing, by all means, take a look at the entire report. The reason that this particular quarterly report is so lengthy because of the attached CVs of several very able scientists that we are calling attention to today. First of all, the Research and Collection Committee recommends the appointment of archaeologist Dr. Catherine Harrell. She's a specialist in conflict and satellite analysis in relation to cultural heritage sites around the world, and her expertise complements that of Dr. Bassett and his work with the U.S. Army and Smithsonian's Monuments Men. And so, Tom, should I turn this over to you, or do we need a vote on this from the board?
We do, and I know that we have 3 that we're voting on, so we'll just take them in turn, and we'll start with Dr. Harrell. As a recommendation from the committee, we do not need a motion or a second, so we just need to go right to the roll call vote, and I'll ask Nathan to take that for us.
All right, so I assume we'll do Dr. Harrell first. I'll have that listed first.
Yes.
Dr. Abdul-Baki.
I'm trying to multitask, so I'm sorry.
No problem.
So is it to move forward with, is it just a vote again?
We have a brand new appointment for a research associate, and that's archaeologist Dr. Catherine Harrell. And then separately, we're going to move on the reappointment of archaeologist Michael Johnson and paleontologist Dr. Paul Olson. So we're sort of doing it in 2 steps, I hope.
Yeah, let's go ahead and start with the new appointment, which is Dr. Harrell. And so.
Okay, so I second that. I second it.
Thank you. Dr. Benzing?
Aye.
Ms. Burnett?
Aye.
Ms. Cooper?
Aye.
Dr. Evans?
Aye.
Ms. Murner?
Aye.
Dr. Nash?
Aye.
Mr. Phillips?
Aye.
Mr. Quinones?
Aye.
Ms. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Sanford votes yes. Ms. Stowe?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, that motion passes. We'll let her know that we've awarded her the research associate status. And so our next reappointment?
Yes, the second thing we need board approval on is the Research and Collections Committee also recommends the reappointment of archaeologist Dr. Michael Johnson and paleontologist Dr. Paul Olson, both of them who have had long relationships with the Natural History Museum.
So we'll go ahead and take those together. And if we'll go through a roll call vote, we're approving reappointment of Dr. Johnson and Olson.
Okay, starting again from the top, Dr. Abdul-Baki.
Aye.
Dr. Benzing.
Aye.
Ms. Burnett.
Aye.
Ms. Cooper.
Aye.
Dr. Evans.
Aye.
Ms. Murner.
Aye.
Dr. Nash.
Aye.
Mr. Phillips.
Aye.
Mr. Quinones.
Aye.
Ms. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Sanford votes yes. Ms. Stowe.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right. At the committee meeting this morning, a number of topics were discussed, one of which was Dr. Bassett gave us an update on the repatriation of the Guatemalan antiquities and street art that came into the museum's possession some time ago. And there are 4 possibilities, 4 avenues of that are being considered in terms of repatriating this material. One is to directly transfer it to the Guatemalan embassy. That's our first choice. The second choice is to work with the Smithsonian to discuss options and possibly take advantage of their expertise and connections to liaise with the appropriate agencies in the Guatemalan government. A third choice, if those two don't pan out, is a low-cost direct transfer from the Virginia Museum of Natural History to the National Museum in Guatemala. And essentially that's packing things up carefully, buying someone a plane ticket, putting the items in a suitcase and take them there personally. And then the last option in order of importance is to donate the artifacts to a more appropriate institution locally. But as I said, direct transfer to the Guatemalan embassy is the first choice here. And Dr. Bassett informed us that they'll get some more information on this effort to repatriate these items next week. And so certainly we'll have more information to report at the next quarterly meeting. A number of other highlights. Drs. Kuiper and Ivanov have already commented on the establishment of a molecular lab, which of course increases the research opportunities, not only for the curatorial staff, but also makes us a go-to institution for other agencies who want to take advantage of those facilities to complement their own work and also provide student training opportunities, among many other things. They've also been involved in refurbishing spaces in the museum that have been underutilized or no longer being utilized at this point, one of which is establishment of a lab for visiting researchers that will also serve as housing for the zooarchaeology collection. And another space that's in the process of being developed is a STEM lab. And this is to showcase new methodologies in museum scientists, in museum sciences. And it includes GIS and imaging facilities, a 3D printer, which has a multitude of applications in museum work, and also provide a space for digital assets with the idea of, as the museum increases its efforts to digitize its collections. And also there'll be an opportunity through the STEM lab to have a screen or other devices to monitor what's going on in that room so the public can see what's going on, and also to present current museum research activities that are going on. So publications, field work, acquisitions, all research activities would be there flashing on a screen so visitors walking by can see the museum curators at work and the staff, and also find out the latest developments and activities going on by the museum. One of the new additions since we met last was the addition of Dr. Jackson Means, who's joined the curatorial staff to digitize the millipede collection built by the late Dr. Richard Hoffman. Just on a personal note, Richard Hoffman was one of the first people I met when I moved to Virginia 20 years ago, and my first trip to the museum was 20 years ago. And his legacy is impressive, to say the least, in terms of the collection he built and his publications to support those collections. But the collection of millipedes that he built during his time at the museum is of international renown and includes over 22,000 specimens. This is a very poorly known group worldwide, so this is a collection of incredible significance. And Dr. Means informs us that within this collection, there are at least 600 new species, that is, species that have yet to be described in the scientific literature, and possibly up to 200 new genera. This is a major gold mine of information. And so this is what he's going to be involved with in terms of making this collection available to researchers around the world, at least digitally. The curators have been involved in making recordings that are used for teacher trainings. It's a lot of these things that have been tested out or have been engaged in as a direct result of the pandemic are working. And it's very likely that some of these things will continue to be carried on even when we are post-pandemic and whatever that new normal is. I want to take a moment to commend the curators and research and collection staff for their continued commitment to the museum's mission to interpret Virginia's natural heritage within a global context in ways that are relevant to all citizens of the Commonwealth. The museum is fortunate to have such a dedicated team of scientists. And in spite of the pandemic and the dearth of opportunities to share physical spaces with colleagues and museum visitors, the curators and research and collections staff are exploring and implementing various technologies to maintain their contact with peers and the public and expand their reach and that of the museum's collections through digitization of specimens and artifacts. Mr. Chairman, that's the end of my report.
Thanks, Art. Are there questions for the Research and Collections Committee?
Hey, it's Michael. I just wanted to make sure I saw on the Collections Committee report that the Chrysler Museum was mentioned as a state institution with the pre-Columbian collection. I just wanted to make sure everyone knew that the VMFA also has a nice small pre-Columbian collection of about, I think about 200 pieces. So just an example of another state institution, which would be possible if we wanted to go that route. And I've done a lot of work with the ancient art curator there, so I'd be happy to talk that through if we decided we wanted to get more information on going that route.
Okay, I'm sure the Chrysler Museum was just put forth as an example and wasn't mean to exclude any others. And again, that's not the first choice. We'd like to see these materials go home to Guatemala. But if it comes to that, I'm sure that Dr. Bassett will explore all possibilities and find the most appropriate depository for the collections.
Seeing a thumbs up from Dr. Bassett.
Great, sounds good, thanks.
Any other questions or comments about Research and Collections in their report and activities?
Roberto?
Just to plant a seed, you mentioned the stuff about a new 3D printer, and that just opens up all sides of brainstorming possibilities for me, and hopefully you folks are considering that, even just starting with a 3D printing 101 mini video for our museum folks, all the way to print on demand of little things in the gift shop. So that thing could be running 24/7 if we do it right and earning its keep.
Good point.
Casts are for sale in the museum shop now. That's not 3D printing, that's traditional molding and casting, and they do tend to be, especially the smaller items, do tend to be popular. So we could certainly add to that with the capability of 3D printing.
Saw Lisa's hand, and then, yeah, Lisa.
Yeah, you'll have to decide if you want to use the printer this way or not. But my son's school got a 3D printer when he was in first grade, and it was used for making all manner of objects. And it was very popular with the students, so much so that it broke down and they got another 3D printer a year later. But if we want to use it to attract youngsters, it is extremely popular with the, I would say, middle school and down age group. But it does create a lot of wear and tear on the machine.
Thank you. Any others? Hearing none, let me ask for a report from Finance and Marketing, and I'll recognize Jennifer Burnett and also point out that there is a report in your packet. Jennifer, are you?
Sorry, we've
It's all right.
lost power, so it's a little chaotic here right now. So as far as the development committee, we had a, it's really, I guess, financing and marketing committee, right?
Well, there are two really. There's a finance committee and there's a development and marketing committee, and they're meeting together. And if you look in our bylaws, that's fine.
Yeah, that's what I was just making sure of, because my minutes say finance and marketing, and I wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something.
Right.
So we had a finance and marketing committee meeting on January 15th. A lot of the things that we discussed, we've already touched on at this meeting. we reviewed the second quarter financials, which I've already done in the treasurer's report. We reviewed the operating expenses. We talked about capital projects, and some of those or a lot of the capital projects were talked about with respect to the facilities report with the ESDOs and all of that. And I guess Joe's already mentioned that, general funding looks stable, that, his recent call with the upcoming, with the state about the session that's going on now was optimistic. Ryan gave marketing and advancement updates. We kind of talked about those already. The charitable gifts to the foundation are up 85%. The museum, revenue is down due to the restricted public hours and the closing of the cafe. But overall combined earned revenue is at 96% of last year's total. Discovery Fund donations are up slightly. Endowment growth continues. Memberships revenue is down, but we're continuing to push for memberships in the upcoming virtual programming and featured videos that we've already talked about. So that's about all I have on that committee.
Thank you, Jennifer. Any questions or comments on that report? Lisa?
Why do we think giving is up, and how can we replicate it going forward?
Ryan, do you have any?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think it's we try to dig in as much as possible. I think part of it was we very quickly, when the pandemic started, we tried to very quickly reach out to our existing partners and donors to transition again from things like in-person festivals and the things that were the most popular to really start pushing that we're still active, we're still doing virtual programming, drive-through events, things like that. So I think that was a big part of it, was making sure that donors didn't think that everything just shut down. There are still opportunities. And I think we've been somewhat surprised at how popular these things have been. So like the virtual programming, they've been very attractive for different partners. So that's something that we can learn from. And somebody mentioned earlier, hopefully continue some of these activities even when the pandemic's over.
And not to take away anything that Ryan has said and that the foundation has done, it certainly has done its part under difficult circumstances. That said, the 85% is also a little bit, in my estimation, of an artifact of the data, because a lot of times our grant funding is cyclical. So we might go 1 year, like if I'm not mistaken, 2 years ago, we had IMLS money. I can't remember if it was National Geographic or NSF money. So we had, quite a chunk of cash for the researchers to work with on multi-year projects. And then the following year, it looked like we didn't have any grants, but we were still working on the money that we had received previously. So it looks like giving is down. So this same way this year, in particular, I'll point out with Hayden and Madeline Bassett really hitting the ground running. I forget what projects are mentioned in this specific development and marketing report, but they received over $100,000 from the Department of Historic Resources for the Smith River Survey. And they just recently got word that they were receiving over 2 years, another $50,000. This is something that's been in the works for a long time with the Sons of the American Revolution, to fold into the Smith River Survey in a way, a 2-year survey of Patrick Henry's Leatherwood plantation here in Henry County. So again, that's kind of the cyclical nature of these grants. So yeah, Lisa, I understand your point, but it's a little bit of an artifact of the data.
Okay, thank you both.
Okay, Roberto has a hand up.
Yeah, just a quick question. It's my coffee was still settling in at the beginning of the meeting. I believe I heard something to the effect of 2 audits that were done, one in IT and was the other financial. I'm just curious if these are on a public website somewhere, or where we would see these, or where would the public see these?
So, Roberto, to answer your question, you can go on the Department of Accounts website, and there's a should be published there coming up after this session, if it's not there already. You guys hear me okay? Sorry.
A little weak, but I heard you say that they are published on
They're
website.
On the DOA's account. And it was a general accounting audit, which happens every 2 years, and then the VETA audit, which happens every 1 to 3 years.
Yeah, I didn't know if those were normally on our website as well, or we find those on as a public doc.
Do we post those on our own website is the question. I don't know if anybody has a response to that.
I'm not aware that we've ever done that, Tom. I just think Ryan's shaking his head. Frankly said, from a staffing standpoint, that just seems to be so much a part of our day-to-day. We don't think about that. If it's the board's pleasure that the links to those reports are posted, we'll find an appropriate place to put them.
I am familiar with a way other boards that I've been on have operated when there is an audit, that there is some sort of an approval that happens at the board level of that audit. I think in general, we take the treasurer's report as just information, but perhaps we go through and actually formally approve the audits, but I'm not sure if that's been the history of this board and the business that we've done historically.
I think we've just reported those as information. And now that I'm thinking about it, there really is nothing wrong with us publishing these online and even making a Facebook note of them, especially since as long as I've been here, these have been, glowing reports from the state. I think it speaks to the staff's responsibility as well as the talented managing large sums of money. So I think that would be an opportunity to perhaps celebrate the idea that people can see us as a trustworthy institution.
I see Audrey's hand, so Audrey may have some advice for us too.
I just think it might help to clarify. Most of the entities that you participate in that approve the audit are probably institutions of higher education that have their own department of internal audit. And so there is a board role in approving that process. Other state agencies and institutions of higher education in particular are permitted by statute and generally do maintain a department of internal audit as opposed to using the state auditors. But the museum does use the state audit process. And so it's handled by the state, hosted by the state, and not approved by the governing board of that institution. So just in terms that, in case that clarification is helpful.
That is very helpful. Thank you. I just want to make sure we're not falling down on our duties, and it sounds like we're doing the right thing. Any other comments on the finance and development and marketing report? Paying attention a little bit to our time, I want to be efficient. So we have a couple other reports coming up, and importantly, towards the end of our agenda, we have a nominating committee. So let me call for a report from the Education and Public Programs Committee if we have one. I know that there's one in our packet. I don't see Cord on the call. I do see Mukunda. I don't know if she was wanting to hold that or if perhaps someone else might.
Faye was in the meeting as well.
Faye.
Yeah. Faye or Mukunda, I don't know if either of you want to make a report.
I think Christy was going to cover forward because he didn't think he'd have a connection.
She lost power. So
I lost. Yeah, we don't have her on the call any longer.
Okay, well, we had a committee. Can you all hear me? I had to drop my internet and go to the phone.
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Oh, except we might have just lost her.
I'll readmit her. But to start with, Zach apparently has 2 slides that Faye would like to share with the group. So Zach, I'm assuming you're still there. Yes, sir. All right. So if you could show the 2 slides of the new exhibits that will support our in-house education programs. So this here is our a portion of our Lepidoptera exhibit, that is butterflies and moths of the world. It's all color coded based upon a map that you can't see in these slides, but it's associated with the biogeographic range of these species. So the map is color coded to match these panels. This is the hallway where you gain access to the lecture hall. Admitting Faye back in now, she might pick this up, but it's a very awkward space. But if we go back to our 2010 reaccreditation document, the visiting committee said because of the small size of our museum, relatively speaking, we will benefit from taking advantage of every bit of space that we can. And this had traditionally been an if not non-utilized space. So I think for the general visitor on a general day, this will be good. During, say, a family festival, this might be a bottleneck area, but I still think it'll be something that's effective and so forth. So next slide. And so what we have here on the left is the trout tank that is now currently, it looks a little different than this now. It's been slightly improved and it will continue to improve. And what you see on the right, the image is a little choppy and, well, it's short. But what this is a projection on the floor that will go in front of the trout tank. And what it allows you to do is to interact with the moving images. So children will be able to say, I haven't talked with the staff about the specific lessons here. Faye, please jump in if Christy describes some of them, but it's something like you can go through and you can collect up organisms to, say, measure water quality and so forth. So as this is projected on the floor, Zach, can you hit play again by chance? So as you see here, the user is going across the image and actually modifying the environment, and more than just making splashy marks in the water, this will actually allow people to conduct various activities in a pre-programmed way. So this will be a new bit in the Wild Watersheds exhibit, and something that's a little more flashy, a little more technical. But as you've all heard over the years, I suffer from zoo envy because everything we display is dead. It will still be hard to take away from the live trout that we'll be raising in this rather sizable tank. Faye, did you manage to reconnect with us?
Yeah, I did. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yes, I got that. My connection's all the way around, not good today. I didn't hear all what you reported on behalf of the Education Committee. I will say that one thing out at us yesterday when we met is how much outreach and programming is continuing, particularly through the virtual mode and the outreach programming in some, from like afar programs has increased dramatically as a result of efforts to kind of override what's going on with COVID. So that was, I thought, really very positive news.
Yeah, and I'll also point out, I wasn't on the meeting yesterday, but just as a thumbs up to our staff educators, they've really filled an important niche in that they turned the Homeschool Science and Education Academy completely virtual. So this is an every other Wednesday program where we used to have the halls populated by homeschoolers. It is now all online, and the reception has been very good, and the homeschoolers very appreciative. So Tom,
any questions for education public programs? If not, I think we'll just keep Faye going and ask her to do the Waynesboro Advocacy Committee report.
Okay, well, my report will be short because there's a fairly extensive report in your packet, so I'm not going to go over those. But I would like to give just a couple brief updates. As Tom mentioned earlier, we are watching carefully the funding situation with regard to the Waynesboro campus, and we did receive some very positive, encouraging news this week from Richmond that the House has approved $10 million to be released from the original $18 million that was appropriated in last year's budget, but was put on hold because of the uncertainties of finance because of COVID. So that is making its way over to the Senate, and we will be probably strategizing, probably be back in touch with Senator Hanger to make sure, because he is on the Finance Committee, and we are still on the list for our detailed planning. So we'll keep our fingers crossed on that, and certainly we'll be watching closely what happens on the Senate side. Also, I think Joe mentioned the Wayne Theater lecture series that has continued and has been very successful. He mentioned the great response to Jim Beard's lecture on geology of the Shenandoah Valley, but also Cal Avenant's lecture on Virginia biodiversity was well received, having gotten nearly 700 views. So that was great. And coming up in March is Kip Mumaw on March 16th. She'll be speaking on stream restoration in the Shenandoah Valley, which should be quite interesting. There's been so much work done here in the valley to improve the condition of our water quality and impaired streams, which unfortunately we have a lot of. And one thing I just learned from Tom, that you actually don't have to be a Facebook subscriber to see these posted on the museum's Facebook. And I don't know if everybody's been sent the link for those, but that might be something worth doing so that all board members can view those presentations. And then lastly, we're also planning for our second brainstorming session with area educators to focus on, or to get their input and ideas about exhibit content and design. The first one we held last fall with, I think, 14 or 15 people was very, very productive. And we hope to do the second one of those, focusing on a different area within the museum plan. So if Tom or Joe or Lynn, did any of you have anything else to add?
I'll just add that the links to the Richmond presentation was included at the end of the Waynesboro Advocacy Committee report. So if you'd like to see those slides, I also indicate the ones that are relevant to VMNH.
Okay, great.
I have nothing to add, Faith.
Okay.
I don't have anything to add, although we're really excited about what the outcome of this session will be. So
yes,
next I'd
definitely.
like to, and I've already actually reached out to Senator Hanger, and I encourage all of our trustees to reach out to their representatives. The next reports will be from the Strategic Planning Committee and the Nominating Committee, and I'll just recognize Lisa for both of those so she can just start us in.
Yeah, so I'll start with the Strategic Planning Committee and do that one very briefly. We have not had a meeting of the committee since our last board meeting. I am pleased to see that our sort of effort to promote diversity, transparency as a museum has started with our engagement efforts. And I look forward to the next committee meeting, which I will schedule very shortly, so we continue our discussions about diversity and diversity reporting and transparency. Any questions for that committee before I move on to the nominating committee? All right, on the nominating committee, it's a little bit more exciting. There's a lot to discuss. This is the meeting where we put forward a draft slate of officers, which we'll vote on at the next meeting. And of course, if you have recommendations that are different than the slate, this is where we discuss them. So without further ado, I will give you our suggested slate. The nominating committee met by phone with sort of one-off, but we came together with this recommendation. So to replace Tom, who is at the end of his term, the committee suggests that Nathan Sanford take the position as chair. To replace Art Evans as vice chair, the committee recommended me, Lisa Murner. The treasurer would stay the same, Jennifer Burnett. Jennifer's term is not up. And then to replace secretary, Nathan Sanford had been secretary, and now we're suggesting he be moved to chair. So we nominated Roberto Quinones. And I apologize, Roberto, I probably got your last name completely wrong. And of course, Tom would still serve on the board as an ex officio member. So just to go back over that slate, the nomination for chair is Nathan Sanford. The nomination for vice chair is Lisa Murner. No change in the treasurer position, and the nomination for secretary would be Roberto. So is there any discussion of that slate at this time?
We do also need to open the floor to nominations at this time. So if there's no discussion, I'll also ask if there are any further nominations for any of these 4 offices.
This is Nathan. While I'm flattered and I respect the nomination or the mention of me as a chair, I'm not sure that I have that capacity right now. So I would encourage somebody else to volunteer.
So Nathan, I understand that and respect that, and I apologize. I thought we were prepared there. So let us take that under consideration. Joe, Tom, do you want to handle that offline? Do you want to? How do you want to move forward here?
Yeah, I think what we're doing here is just introducing the slate, and we have until May to consider any additional nominations. Joe, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll start twisting arms about 12:31 this afternoon. So I was just about to email both you and Lisa. I think we can handle this offline, and I'll coordinate with Audrey just to make sure we're doing this all above board. But I think this is something that we can communicate out in advance of the May meeting by email. Since the slate is not voted on, it's simple communication. Right. So, but we'll double check on that.
And I have opened the floor for further nominations. I haven't heard any. We'll do the same at the May meeting, so we'll be able to handle it in that way at the May meeting if we do have other nominations for chair.
That concludes the report of the nominating committee, Tom.
Okay, and I haven't heard any other nominations, so we'll make the nominations closed for now until our May meeting. So I guess the last order of business then is to see whether there are any announcements. In particular, I want to thank Len Poulin for staying with us throughout the meeting, and if there are any comments or announcements from the foundation, I'd be certainly willing to accept those now.
I have nothing to add, but I did take note of the 2 things that came out of this regarding diversity, as well as our financial support growth, that I'll take back to the foundation board and let Mary Handy know that this is something that the Board of Trustees was highlighting today for discussion at our next meeting.
Do we have any other announcements? Joe.
Yeah, I just want to make sure everyone's aware that we have the Virginia Association of Museums meeting upcoming. Because it's online, we get to how am I getting extra hands? We get to register all the staff for one fee. I do believe that board members are included in that. If not, we're willing to make that open to Board of Trustees. I have sent you the link to the schedule. It's in March. So if you're interested in participating, let me know. I know at least one of you have already done that. That being said, Dr. Bassett is going to be a featured speaker. A lot of the sessions are going to be pre-recorded, but there are going to be there are going to be daily live presentations. So Dr. Bassett and his program here will be one of the day's featured speakers that week, and then I'll be part of one of the pre-recorded panels on museums and environmental justice. So if anyone has any input on that topic, please feel free to reach out with me. I would love to discuss it with you. So.
Thanks, Joe. And just a reminder, you can expect from me by way of the staff, the board nomination form for the foundation. So be thinking about folks for that. We are also looking to fill a couple of positions on our own board. And so we're going to be in touch with appointments on that. So if you have suggestions of folks that want to apply for those positions, please do so. And lastly, we were supposed to meet in Waynesboro for our May meeting. Of course, that's going to be pending the lifting of our emergency order by the governor. So we'll be paying attention to that a little bit as well. Obviously, if we're still under the emergency, we're going to be meeting by Zoom. But I hope that sooner or later we'll get to see each other face to face once again. And at this point, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you for coming.